The alarm goes off. You reach for your phone. It's 7 a.m. You slept 8 hours, and yet you feel like you haven't slept at all. Your body is heavy. Your mind is fog. The thought of getting out of bed feels genuinely impossible. And the worst part? This isn't new. This is every single morning. You're not lazy, you're not weak, and you're definitely not imagining it. 1 in 5 adults worldwide reports persistent fatigue at any given time. Not occasional tiredness, persistent, relentless, life-disrupting exhaustion. And for millions, it has no obvious explanation. So what is actually happening inside your body? Why are some people running on empty no matter how much they sleep, eat, or rest? And what does modern medicine actually know about how to fix it? This is the complete medical guide to persistent fatigue. And by the end of this video, you will understand your exhaustion in a way most doctors never take the time to explain. The answer will surprise you. Because fatigue is never just one thing. Every year, fatigue sends more people to their primary care physician than almost any other complaint. It is one of the most Googled health topics on Earth. And yet, it remains one of the most misunderstood, misdiagnosed, and undertreated conditions in medicine. Here is what most people get wrong. Fatigue and sleepiness are not the same thing. Sleepiness is a biological drive to sleep. You feel it in the afternoon slump. You feel it when your eyelids get heavy watching TV. It is your brain asking for rest. Fatigue is something else entirely. Fatigue is a pervasive lack of energy and vitality that does not resolve simply by sleeping. You can sleep 10 hours and wake up with fatigue. You can rest all weekend and still feel it Monday morning. Clinicians actually classify fatigue into 3 distinct categories, and knowing which one applies to you is the essential first step. The first is physiologic fatigue. This is short-term, caused by overexertion, poor sleep, or a bad diet. Fix those things, and it resolves. The second is secondary fatigue, lasting 1 to 6 months, driven by an underlying health condition. Treat the condition, and the fatigue follows. The third is chronic fatigue, more than 6 months, not relieved by rest, not explained by obvious causes. This is the category that most baffles both patients and physicians, and it has a name: myalgic encephalomyelitis, or ME/CFS. The CDC estimates 3.3 million Americans have diagnosable ME/CFS, and since the COVID-19 pandemic, those numbers have exploded in ways that have shocked even the researchers studying it. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let's start with the single most common cause of persistent fatigue, the one hiding in plain sight in nearly every adult's bedroom. Sleep disorders are responsible for the majority of fatigue presentations in primary care, and the most prevalent one is not what most people expect. Insomnia affects nearly 1/3 of all American adults. Not occasional bad nights, chronic difficulty falling or staying asleep that compounds over days, weeks, and months into a kind of exhaustion debt that sleep alone cannot repay. But insomnia has a rival, and this rival is far more dangerous because most people who have it don't even know. Obstructive sleep apnea, OSA, is a condition where the airway repeatedly collapses during sleep, causing breathing interruptions that jolt the brain out of deep sleep dozens or even hundreds of times per night. The person rarely fully wakes up. They have no memory of it, but their body does. Up to 80% of people with sleep apnea report fatigue or decreased energy as their primary symptom. Not snoring, not gasping, fatigue. Here is the cruel irony. You can sleep 8 hours with sleep apnea and feel worse than someone who slept 5, because you are never reaching stage 3 slow wave sleep, the only stage where the brain actually restores itself. You are skimming the surface of sleep all night long and waking up as if you never slept at all. Left untreated, sleep apnea doesn't just exhaust you. It raises your risk of high blood pressure, diabetes, stroke, and heart disease. And because the sufferer often doesn't snore loudly or feel like they're waking up, millions of cases go undiagnosed for years. There is a third sleep disruptor that has exploded in the modern era: one that didn't even exist as a medical concern 30 years ago. Blue light from electronic devices suppresses melatonin, the hormone that signals to your brain that it is time to sleep. Doom scrolling at midnight, watching one more episode at 1 a.m. These habits aren't just making you tired the next morning. They are systematically dismantling your circadian rhythm, your body's internal master clock, making it structurally harder to fall asleep, stay asleep, and reach the deep, restorative stages your body needs. Now, here is where fatigue gets genuinely complicated, and where most people, and frankly most physicians, stop looking too soon. The mind and the body are not separate systems when it comes to energy. They are one system, and what happens in your brain directly determines how much energy you feel in your body. Depression is one of the most common causes of persistent fatigue in primary care, accounting for nearly 1 in 5 cases. And the biological mechanisms behind this are profound. Depression elevates pro-inflammatory cytokines, signaling molecules that are meant to fight infection, but when chronically elevated, create a state of systemic inflammation that drains energy at a cellular level. Depression dysregulates cortisol and disrupts the serotonin and dopamine pathways that govern motivation, reward, and the very sense that effort is worth making. A landmark longitudinal study found that individuals with depression were 4.5 times more likely to develop chronic fatigue syndrome within 5 years compared to people without depression. And here is the critical insight. Fatigue from depression does not respond to rest or sleep. Because this is not about being physically tired, the brain has fundamentally altered how it regulates energy, and no amount of rest will change that without addressing the underlying depression. The symptoms that suggest depression is driving fatigue include persistent low mood, emotional numbness, loss of interest in activities you once enjoyed, difficulty concentrating, and fatigue that is worst in the morning, not better after sleep, but worse. Anxiety operates through a related but distinct mechanism. Persistent worry and rumination consume enormous cognitive and physiological resources. The nervous system stays in a low-grade state of threat response. Cortisol slightly elevated, heart rate slightly elevated, muscles slightly tensed. Hour after hour, day after day, this background hypervigilance drains the body's energy reserves in ways that are invisible but cumulative and devastating. Anxiety and depression frequently coexist, and together they create a negative feedback loop that impairs sleep, worsens fatigue, reduces the motivation to exercise or eat well, which worsens the depression and anxiety further. But there is a third mental health category that has only recently been taken seriously by medicine, and it has a very specific biological fingerprint: burnout. Burnout is not just feeling stressed. Burnout is the final stage of chronic, unresolved stress, and it produces measurable changes in the hypothalamic-pituitary-adrenal axis. The HPA axis, the body's central stress response system. In early burnout, the HPA axis overfires. Cortisol floods the system. You feel wired, driven, anxious, unable to rest even when exhausted. With sustained chronic stress, the system does something even more alarming. It downregulates. It becomes blunted. The stress response that was supposed to protect you goes offline. And what remains is the hallmark of burnout, fatigue, what clinicians call wired but tired, exhausted to the bone but unable to relax, can't sleep deeply, can't recover. In healthcare workers, chronic fatigue prevalence has been measured at 37%, and the occupational cost of burnout extends far beyond tired doctors and nurses. It is reshaping entire industries. The endocrine system, your body's chemical messaging network, is one of the most commonly implicated systems in persistent fatigue. And thyroid dysfunction is almost always the first place a doctor looks. An underactive thyroid, hypothyroidism, slows down every metabolic process in the body. Your cells literally produce less energy. The result? Fatigue, weight gain, depression, dry skin, cold intolerance, and brain fog. It is, in many ways, the textbook description of chronic exhaustion. But here is the clinical catch most people don't know. standard TSH testing misses a significant portion of thyroid dysfunction. Many people, particularly those with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, an autoimmune form of hypothyroidism, have TSH levels that fall within the normal range on paper, while their bodies are still struggling with poor conversion of the inactive T4 hormone into the active T3 form that cells actually use. A full thyroid panel, TSH, free T4, free T3, and TPO antibodies, tells a far more complete story than a single TSH number. Yet most standard panels stop at TSH. Diabetes and insulin resistance represent another massive and often underappreciated cause of fatigue. When cells cannot efficiently use glucose for energy due to insulin resistance, they essentially run on a depleted fuel supply. The result is persistent tiredness, brain fog, and energy crashes after meals. Even pre-diabetes, with only modest blood sugar elevation, creates significant fatigue through increased inflammation and cellular energy inefficiency. For women specifically, there is a fatigue category that affects the majority and is still routinely dismissed or overlooked by mainstream medicine. Over 95% of perimenopausal and menopausal women report fatigue. 95%. Fluctuating and declining estrogen and progesterone levels disrupt sleep architecture, alter neurotransmitter balance, specifically serotonin and dopamine, and increase cortisol reactivity. The combination produces profound, sometimes debilitating exhaustion that hits suddenly, without warning, in women who describe themselves as previously having boundless energy. Approximately 50% of women with sleep disturbances are perimenopausal, and yet the connection between their fatigue and their hormonal transition is frequently not made until years into the suffering. Now we move to a category that surprises many people, because most of us assume our diet is basically fine. Fatigue is one of the body's earliest and most sensitive signals of inadequate nutrient availability. And several key nutritional deficiencies are extraordinarily common, frequently missed on standard blood panels, and directly responsible for profound exhaustion. Iron deficiency is the most prevalent nutritional deficiency on Earth. And here is the critical clinical point that most people, and even many physicians, don't know. Iron deficiency causes significant fatigue before anemia even develops. Standard blood counts measure hemoglobin. If hemoglobin is normal, the test comes back normal. But ferritin, the protein that stores iron in your cells, can be severely depleted long before hemoglobin drops. And depleted ferritin impairs cellular oxygen delivery, mitochondrial function, and energy production in ways that create profound fatigue with a completely normal CBC. Ferritin must be explicitly requested. It is not included in standard panels by default. Vitamin B12 deficiency is particularly common in vegans, vegetarians, and adults over 50, where absorption naturally declines. B12 is essential for red blood cell production and neurological function. Without it, you develop both physical fatigue and cognitive symptoms, brain fog, memory problems, difficulty concentrating. Vitamin D deficiency is near epidemic in populations with indoor lifestyles, northern latitudes, and darker skin tones. Vitamin D supports mitochondrial energy production and muscle function. Deficiency correlates strongly with fatigue, low mood, and muscle weakness. Magnesium is the cofactor in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body, including the production of ATP, the cell's fundamental energy currency. Highly stressed individuals deplete magnesium through chronic cortisol elevation, and most standard metabolic panels don't measure it accurately. The common thread across all nutritional deficiencies? You can feel devastatingly exhausted, have a normal blood panel, and be significantly deficient in multiple nutrients that the standard tests didn't check for. And now we arrive at the part of this story that is reshaping medicine in real time. Because if the COVID-19 pandemic did anything, it forced the scientific and medical community to take chronic fatigue more seriously than at any point in history. A 2025 NIH-funded study found that ME/CFS cases are 15 times higher than pre-pandemic levels. Not 50% higher, not double, 15 times. COVID-19 infection increases the risk of developing ME/CFS nearly 5-fold compared to uninfected individuals. And 4.5% of COVID-infected participants in the NIH RECOVER study met full diagnostic criteria for ME/CFS. What makes long COVID fatigue uniquely devastating and uniquely instructive is that we can now see its biological mechanisms with unprecedented clarity. A 2024 study from Amsterdam UMC found that mitochondria in long COVID patients produce significantly less ATP than in healthy controls. The cellular power plants are simply not generating enough energy. And here is the most alarming finding. This mitochondrial dysfunction worsens after exercise. This explains post-exertional malaise, PEM, one of the defining and most misunderstood features of ME/CFS. PEM is not normal tiredness after exertion. It is a systematic worsening of all symptoms: fatigue, brain fog, pain, dizziness, beginning 12 to 72 hours after even mild physical or mental activity. A short walk, a phone call, reading a book. For ME/CFS patients, pushing through fatigue, the standard advice given for ordinary tiredness, can cause crashes that leave patients bedbound for days or weeks. To receive a formal ME/CFS diagnosis under the National Academy of Medicine criteria, 3 core symptoms must be present: substantial functional impairment from fatigue lasting more than 6 months, post-exertional malaise, and unrefreshing sleep. Plus at least one of cognitive impairment, brain fog and word-finding difficulties, or orthostatic intolerance, dizziness and palpitations when standing. A 2025 study described the functional impairment of long COVID as comparable in severity to a stroke or Parkinson's disease. This is not a condition of people who need to push harder. This is a profound biomedical illness that is only beginning to receive the scientific attention it deserves. Now, here is one of the most counterintuitive findings in all of fatigue research. And it applies to people who do not have ME/CFS. Sedentary people who are already tired can reduce fatigue by 65% and increase energy by 20% through regular, low-intensity exercise. A comprehensive meta-analysis confirmed that moderate-intensity exercise training produces consistent, meaningful improvements in fatigue, energy, and vitality, not through brute force, but through a direct effect on the central nervous system. Physical activity upregulates the dopamine and serotonin systems that govern energy and motivation. It reduces inflammatory cytokines. It improves the quality of slow-wave sleep. Active adults have a 39% lower risk of experiencing persistent fatigue compared to sedentary peers. Start with 20-minute walks 3 times a week. The energy you put in will return to you multiplied. The exception, and this cannot be overstated, is ME/CFS and long COVID. For these patients, graded exercise therapy can trigger severe post-exertional malaise and has caused genuine harm. The evidence-based approach for ME/CFS is pacing, carefully matching activity to available energy, staying well within your capacity, and building only with specialist guidance. So now, what do you actually do? If your fatigue has lasted more than 2 weeks, is present when you wake up, or is interfering with your daily life, it is time for a systematic evaluation. Here is what to ask your doctor for: a complete blood count to check for anemia, ferritin and iron studies, separately from the CBC, a full thyroid panel, TSH, free T4, free T3, and TPO antibodies, vitamin D, B12, and folate levels, a fasting glucose and HbA1c for diabetes and prediabetes, a comprehensive metabolic panel, and inflammatory markers, HSCRP and ESR. If you are a woman over 40, hormonal panels including estradiol and progesterone are worth discussing. And if your history and labs come back unremarkable, the most likely culprits are sleep disorders, depression, and psychosocial stress. Not because something isn't wrong, but because these are genuinely the most common causes. A sleep study, a mental health evaluation, and honest reflection on stress and burnout are the next steps. There are red flags that require prompt medical evaluation. Do not wait. If your fatigue is accompanied by unexplained weight loss, shortness of breath at rest, recurrent fevers, night sweats, chest pain, neurological changes, weakness, numbness, vision changes, or fatigue that is rapidly worsening rather than stable, see a physician immediately. These symptoms can indicate serious underlying conditions, from autoimmune disease to heart failure to cancer, where early evaluation changes outcomes. For most people, the path forward is clear once the cause is identified. Hypothyroidism responds to thyroid hormone replacement, often with dramatic improvement within weeks. Iron deficiency responds to supplementation or dietary change. Sleep apnea responds to CPAP therapy, one of the most life-changing medical interventions available. Depression and anxiety respond to therapy, medication, or both. Menopausal fatigue responds to hormone therapy. Nutritional deficiencies respond to targeted supplementation. The biology of fatigue is complex, but it is not random, and it is, in the vast majority of cases, treatable. Here is what I want you to take from this. Persistent fatigue is not a character flaw. It is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is a signal. Your body or mind telling you that something needs attention. The three most common causes in primary care are sleep disorders, depression, and psychosocial stress. But nutritional deficiencies and endocrine disease are far more prevalent than most people and many physicians assume. And for a growing number of people, millions more since the pandemic, the cause is a genuine biomedical illness of mitochondrial dysfunction and immune dysregulation that deserves the same seriousness as any other chronic disease. The first step is always the same: get a complete picture. Blood work, sleep evaluation, honest assessment of mental health and stress. Ask for ferritin. Ask for a full thyroid panel. Ask for vitamin D. You deserve to have your energy back, and in almost every case, with the right diagnosis, that is entirely possible. If this video helped you understand your fatigue in a new way, please share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe for more evidence-based medical content that treats you like an intelligent adult. And if you're dealing with chronic fatigue, talk to your doctor. Bring this video if you have to. You are not imagining it, and you don't have to live with it.